Yeah, thanks for advancing. So thank you everyone for being here. I see 49 eyes, which is awesome. Amazing turnout. So welcome. We are Women Who Code San Francisco chapter. I'm Elaine, and with me tonight is Prachi, and we're both part of the leadership team for San Francisco. Tonight we're doing a presentation on how to prepare for a system design interview, and we'll have a workshop at the end where you can apply some of the things you learn. Sorry, could you go back one more slide? I was,
Yes.
So welcome in. Women Who Code is an inclusive community, and our mission is to empower women to excel in technology careers. Anyone who is here for that purpose is welcome. And if you notice anything or experience something that you feel is not in line with that mission, please let myself or Prachi know. I am not sure how to direct message people, but you can also file an incident report at womenwhocode.com/code of conduct. So thanks everyone for being here. And yeah, just while you were showing the screen, I just wanted to talk about that. But it's 6:17, so now we'll get started for real. Next slide, thank you. I went over quite a bit. I will just say that Prachi is a senior software engineer at Metromile and an SF chapter lead. And I am a full stack engineer at New Relic and an SF chapter co-director. And we are presenting tonight as a part of our ongoing backend study group series, which you can find on meetup.com/womenwhoCodeSF. And that series is on Thursday nights every 2 weeks, and we talk about everything related to backend. We have our sessions recorded on YouTube, and I see that Debbie has asked for a link to the backend group. Yes, we'll send you a link in a second. And you can find, I'll also send a link to our playlists of our back issues, let's say, or the previous sessions that have been recorded, and our GitHub repo. So thanks, Michelle. Tonight, Prachi will be telling us about system design. So this is not LeetCode. This is where you're supposed to bring everything that you know about software engineering to bear on a very open-ended question that is a full, mature working product. And so we're going to talk with you about how to prepare for the interview, just best practices, and also we're going to put our heads together and answer an interview question ourselves. And so it is my pleasure to give the floor to Prachi, our senior engineer, and to lead us on this journey. Thank you, Prachi.
Thank you so much, Elaine. I'm so excited for this session, and it's really good to see we have a good turnout today. So let's get started. Quickly, the agenda for today is we'll just revise what is system design. Then we'll talk a bit about how to approach system design interviews. They are arguably one of the tougher interviews in that whole the different type of interviews we give for software engineering roles, right? And then we'll just jump on to an interview question and just try to solve it, do an actual system design interview today. Second. Yeah, I want to call out a few things. This session, depending on the participation, can be heavy. System design is a broad topic. There are a lot of things, a lot of concepts, a lot of tools, different technologies in it. So it can be heavy. And lots of acronyms. I have not mentioned the most common ones because, again, depending on how much familiar you are with, you may or may not be aware of different concepts here. So just keep that in mind. It's okay to not know everything, so don't worry about it as well. We'll go through a few slides, and then we want to solve an actual system design interview question. So we encourage you to ask questions, speak up and discuss. System design interviews are basically a discussion and collaboration. So do speak up, do collaborate, do contribute to the design, bring in your ideas, suggestions, and we want to solve the system design interview question as a team, right? at the end of this presentation, Elaine will walk you through the Miro board. This is where we will consider it as some version of a whiteboard. This is where all of us will contribute and work on this design question. At the end, whatever design we came up with, we will share that in through our backend study group, GitHub, and Slack channel. Just one important thing to note that Elaine and I, we don't know everything that there is to know about system design. And like any other complicated topic, there is a lot that goes into it. So like be patient, bear in mind that we don't know everything in detail, or we don't know everything that's out there. We will keep Q&A at the end. At the end, meaning like while we are doing the interview question, and after we are done with it, we'll keep some time at the end for any questions you may have. Here I mentioned few resources which are like, unfortunately, there are not many good resources about system design, and not all of them are like thorough or detailed. So it's hard to find good content, but like the system design primer on GitHub, and then the course Grokking the System Design Interview, and then this book I have personally found useful. So I'm sharing these resources with all of you here. So quickly, right, like what is system design? So basically system design is where we talk about like your product design is, right? What product are you trying to build? What system are you trying to build? What are different components of this system? What would the data flow be across these different components? What would the interaction be? So at the very high level, this is what your system design is, right? Like you're developing a product, and then you have a backend system around it, a front-end system around it, and you want to understand how these interact, right? How do they manipulate data? So that's what very simple definition of the system design would be. Some examples, like front-end, back-end, APIs, data models, all these together can be called like a system. And when you do system design, you want to talk about, or at least focus on all these different parts of that system. So you can talk about front-end inland, back-end inland, APIs, data models. There are a bunch of other things which we'll also talk about. When it comes to a system design interview, these are really like open-ended questions. There is no right or wrong solution. There is no one solution of how you approach these problems. So these are very open-minded, and the discussion can go in any direction depending on how much knowledge you have. What are some of the things you would like to talk about? What is your interviewer asking you to focus on, right? So very open-ended questions. Not like an algorithm coding interview, which might have one best optimized solution, right? Other solution would be brute force. That's not how system design interview questions work. In the interview, the focus is more on like, how do you understand these different components? How do you understand the interaction between these components? And how would you want to design the flow of data in between these different components, right? So that's what you need to focus on, or that's what you can start with. Communication is very important here. You need to like communicate with your interviewer and talk about like, what we are trying to do here. What's the goal, right? Clarity, like make sure you ask the right questions, or even simple questions, to make sure that the interviewer and the interviewee are on the same page, and they're working towards like the same goal when it comes to what you're trying to design. Bear in mind, it's a discussion. Think about this as like, two colleagues getting together, working on a product requirement, doing some design around it. So it should always be very collaborative. It should be discussion, and that's what we want for tonight as well. What they really focus on, what you should really focus on is like the pros and cons, your trade-offs. Make some assumptions, talk about like some of the things that are unknown, talk about some of the things that are like, hey, this is a short-term problem. We don't have to worry about it 6 months down the line. So this is how I'm going to modify my design to accommodate that thinking or that decision, right? Or, hey, how would this look like 2 years down the line? Maybe, if this is something that will last for 2 years or more, maybe let's solve some of the problems now, so we don't have any kind of headaches, or we can scale the system much better in 2 years, right? So like the interviewer really wants to whatever recommendation you make, the interviewer really wants to know, like, how do you came to that decision, right? What are the pros and cons of the designs? How do you handle unknowns and uncertainties? And how are you approaching this when it comes to short-term design thinking versus long-term? So that would be really helpful. I felt like we should go through some principles of system design. Bear in mind that this is a very, very uh, this is a very simplified slide of what these concepts are. Each principle here is like it can be complicated. It's a big topic on its own, but because we are solving a design question in a bit, I felt like maybe it's a good revision or mention of some of the principles of system design. Bear in mind that depending on what you're designing, something might be more important than the other, and that's something you need to figure out, right? Availability in general is the most important. Other things may or may not be more important, or you might not want to solve for some of these principles as you're designing. It can be something that you'd want to do 6 months down the line, as an example. Yeah, so scaling is basically your change in performance as per changing application demands, right? You have 10 users that are using your app. Tomorrow you want 500 users. How can you, extend your system, scale your system to support all that traffic, right? That's what scaling means. Availability is basically your system uptime and downtime, right? Like how available is your system, and even if there's a downtime, how short it is, what's the impact around it. These are some of the things you need to think about. Reliability would be like, hey, the system was designed to do ABC, and it's actually doing those tasks correctly, right? So then that makes your system reliable. Robustness would be, right, how does your system behave when it comes to any kind of errors or any kind of disturbances, right? A service is down that your system is dependent on, an external service. How would your system be robust in that situation, right? So you have to think about those things. Load balancing is like basically managing your network traffic distribution, right, across servers. You are in a holiday season, and you sell, I don't know, Christmas gift cards. So the peak time or gift cards, right? The peak time for that kind of a website would be, like holidays and stuff. You have more traffic, more users shopping from your website. Whereas something like, I don't know, in June, when there's no festival, not a lot of people would shop from your website. So you need to understand how that will look like. Caching is a data storage layer, basically. It can be something similar to using a database or some kind of Redis cache, or storing some kind of data for lookups. Depending on what your application needs are, you may or may not want to do caching. Data partitioning is distributing your data across different systems to improve querying performance. SQL versus NoSQL. So this is pretty standard in system design interviews. You have some requirement and you need to figure out, right, how would my data models look like? How would I want to store my data? Is it a relational data with tables and stuff like that? Or is it NoSQL, where I have a column-wide data store, or it's a graph database, right? Or a document store. So you have to make those decisions. And that depends on like how your data flow should be. It also depends on what requirements you have and what features of the product and stuff like that. Performance is basically a glitch, how fast and glitch-free your application is. I added a disclaimer there because like you can define what glitch means here and what the downtime would be around it. So that's something to also like keep in mind, like how performant your website is, or your app is, or your product is. Extensibility is future growth, right? Let's say you need to just create a simple app that does 3 things and keep on maintaining it for 3 years down the line, right? Or you need to create an app which has 3 features. Now you want to add 5 more features. You want to just do a lot more things. Then the code that you wrote, it needs to be designed with the thinking that, okay, we are designing it for 3 features right now, but this is gonna we're gonna extend it to add much more code, much more features. So you need to keep that in mind as you build the foundation for it. The last would be error handling and security. Error handling would be something related to you have APIs and you have a user experience. how do you define the error handling for those APIs, right? And security is just how you secure your data, your system interactions, how you if you persist your data, you need to make sure if you're storing PII and stuff like that, you need to secure it. Ideally, you should not store it, but if you do, you need to secure it and persist in there are different ways to do that. But like you need to keep security in mind always, and error handling for a better user experience. So interview do's and don'ts is what we'll talk about next. Like I mentioned before, like ask questions, because an interviewer can can give you like a question like, hey, I want to design, I don't know, Instagram, or I want to design hopin.com. Let's talk about it. It can be so generic as that, or it can be something very specific. So you need to really ask like follow-up questions, understand what the scope is, understand what the requirements are. Are we trying to design for 50 features, or we can just keep 3 features or 3 requirements in mind just because the interview is for 1 hour, and just like focus on them, right? So like really ask more questions, relevant questions, and understand what the interviewer is asking you to design for. If they ask you to design like a banking system, right, like would you need to understand the domain knowledge? If they ask you to design like a hedge fund website or tool, like do you need to understand hedge funds in order to even write a good design, right? So for some interview questions, domain knowledge may be important. For some companies, when you interview, if you have certain domain knowledge, it's appreciated. So you will also want to ask if that it comes into the picture, is that something you need to consider? If they say yes, then you would need to ask them, hey, can you give me some information? Can you explain the domain in a for a some summary of the domain which I can use now to make decisions around the design I would propose. Note all the topics you want to discuss and follow. So let's say your interviewer says, hey, let's focus on these 3 things. So based on that, you would give like, hey, these are the 5 things that I would want to talk about in this design interview. And these are the 5 things that I think are important. Just note them down. If you're whiteboarding or if you're online, just like note them down and make sure you say that to the interviewer, and then make sure and they agree with it. And then you have to now in the interview, just make sure you focus on all those 5 things that you need to talk about. You don't have to talk about anything and everything that comes to your mind. Just make sure that you and the interviewer are on the same page, and you need to focus on these 5 topics that are most important. Visualization helps. This is important because if you're going to a company and you are in a conference room, you have whiteboard, visualizations helps. But if you are giving an online interview, which pretty much everyone is in pandemic times, learn some kind of visualization tool out there. Get some familiarity with it. Miro is one example, great example, which Elaine is going to give us a demo about later today. But just make sure you learn some kind of tool, drawing tool like that, and you can draw component diagram and stuff like that to discuss with the interviewer. They would really appreciate that. Visualization definitely helps. Okay. One really important thing which a lot of people who, especially people who are juniors and new to this, they really get nervous about is if the interviewer asks about a specific concept or technology, they just try to come up with something just to answer. It's okay to say that you don't know something, you don't have experience with it, or you don't have familiarity with it, you have never heard of it, and then ask them, hey, I don't know what you're talking about, can you explain me, can you give me a 1-line summary, can you give me any kind of information that now I can use to consider in this design recommendation that I'm making, right? So it's okay to say you don't know. Be curious and ask, right? Or ask them, is there something else that that I can consider here, right? Make some assumptions. If you have some familiarity from your experience, you can say, hey, I don't know about this, but this is a tool that I had experience with, I have more familiarity with it, can I in this example of in the interview, can I leverage this technology? If they're fine, awesome. So make some assumptions and frame some kind of recommendations or suggestions. That also the interviewer appreciates, because that shows curiosity, and that also shows experience. One other important thing is do what the interviewer asks you to focus on. Yes, at the beginning of the interview, you might talk about hey, there are 10 different things to consider here. If you do all these things, all these 10 things, then we have completely designed the system, right? But they might only ask you to focus on 2 things throughout the entire interview. Because hey, if there's a front-end engineer interviewing you, they might only ask you to focus on API design and user experience. If someone is in backend, they might be fine with talking about front-end, backend, APIs, bunch of different things, data storage, bunch of different things, right? If someone is from the infrastructure side, they might only want to focus on that because that's what their expertise in, or that's what they're interested in, or that's a team they're hiring you for. So they would only focus on specific things. So they just talk with the interviewer and make sure like you understand what they're asking you to focus on, and then continue through your interview focusing on those important topics. Like I said before, there is no right or wrong answer. There is no one solution either. It's just trade-offs. It's just pros and cons. It's just assumptions and constraints you need to keep in mind, and you need to design for that. That's also why system design interviews can be slightly uncomfortable, because you don't know if you did well or not, right? Because you came up with one solution or you came up with one design at the end, but the interviewer is, if they're really experienced, they'll be like, yeah, but this person could have done that, and they didn't do that. So system design interviews can be tricky, but with good practice, you should be able to crack them for sure. Don't start coding. I think Elaine mentioned that before. System design interview it's not a lead code interview. It's not an algorithm interview. You don't have to start coding. Don't start writing the API. Don't start writing the data models on the whiteboard, or hey, this is my data table. This is the column names, and this is the indexes and stuff like that. Don't jump into that right away, unless the interviewer asks you. You have to come up with a basic component diagram. Let's just talk about components first, requirements and components first. And then if the interviewer specifically asks you to focus on, hey, so this is one component, this is one microservice, right? Can we focus on this for a bit? And can you help me understand what APIs you'd want to design for this? Or can you help me understand what data models you would want to design here? Then definitely go for it, because that's what we want to discuss. But unless explicitly asked, don't jump into it right away. There is a time and step for when you want to talk about these things, but definitely not the first thing to begin with. A lot of people make this mistake, and it's a big no, at least in my experience. And don't be quiet. When interviewers do system design interview, they're basically looking for a colleague. They are looking for someone they can just discuss design with and collaborate and work together. So don't be quiet. It's okay to say something, or even if you want to be like, hey, I need to think about it for half a minute. Okay, at least then express it. That isn't just not talking for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. This should be a collaboration. So this should be very light, in the sense that they just want to discuss things with you. They just want to discuss trade-offs with you. So it should be very it should be a conversation. So don't be nervous about someone judging you. They're just trying to understand you, and they're just trying to have a conversation with you. Yeah, so there is some framework how you can approach system design interview. Today's question, we are going to design Airbnb. Again, I'm repeating, this should be a collaborative effort. So we want you to unmute and talk. We want you to collaborate to the design, collaborate to the component diagram that we will be showing you. And we just want to let's get together and design Airbnb, right? So this should be a lot of fun, I think. To approach such a design question, you have to start with components first. Right? So all these components that we need to this can be some kind of framework that you can, remember I mentioned these 5 topics that you would want to talk about. Consider this as those 5 topics, right? First, you want to talk about requirements, right? What are you trying to do here? Exactly. Requirements are 2 types. Functional would be hey, product requirements. Hey, this is what our customers want, so we are building it. Or this is what we need to build in order to grow the company. So, okay, so this is the product you're building, or the service you're building, right? So those will be functional or business or product requirements. You need to understand that. Non-functional would be consider design principles, right? You want to design a service that is we want to design this service, right? This product service, but like it should be like, we need some low latency, we need high availability, stuff like that. We need these, it should be read heavy system versus a write heavy system, stuff like that. So you would want to talk about like all these functional requirements as well. It should be a highly available system, right? This is highly performant. These are some of the things you also need to understand. SLAs come into the picture, service level agreements that talk about some of these things. So that is also something you will need to understand. This would be a part of the requirements. Data models would be like, hey, do we need a SQL data store? Do we need a NoSQL? In NoSQL, is it a column wide? Is it a document? Is it a graph data store? These are some of the decisions you'll need to make. Of course, you need to understand the product. Of course, you need to understand what you're trying to do here in order to make these decisions. Also, you can pick a SQL database, but is it like MySQL? Is it Postgres? Is it something else? Those are also some of the decisions you will need to make, like even between different tools. What are the trade-offs? And this database does indexing better, or this database does asset compliance better. You need to kind of like also do basically compare the trade-offs between even different tools out there, right? Before determining what you'd want to go ahead. Caching is important. Do you want to do caching? Do you not want to do caching? If yes, then how do you want to implement caching, right? You need to understand that. Data partitioning, load balancing, all these concepts that we discussed would be related to data and like system availability, which you should also consider. Backend services, right? Like how many microservices do you need? Do you need one microservice? Do you need 5 microservices? Are these all internal, or this is an external vendor that you need to now get data from, right? So what would that external integration look like? Do you need to secure your APIs? Like what are you using for what if that system is down? How are you gonna like do error handling, right? Like you need to think about those things. API and front end, again, it somewhat aligns with backend services where like, hey, are you designing REST APIs? How many APIs do you need? You're designing 3 features, so maybe 3 APIs. In the future, you might need more. Are you doing CRUD operations? What does your user experience look like? For some applications which are very front end heavy, or where the user experience matters a lot, you might design the APIs for the user experience. For some applications where it's very data heavy, you might want to design for the data, right? So you have to consider all these things as you think about APIs and front end, and also your data models. Security would be right. Yeah, like do you need authentication? Do you need authorization? How extensible your service is, right? If you want to now integrate with 5 different services, how easy is it to make changes in your code and your services to support that, right? Like how would scaling look like? What would availability look like? So you need to think about all those things as well. The last topic for this presentation is the Miro board, which is where we'll actually do the hands-on design for the interview question, which is design Airbnb. And I'll hand over to Elaine to help us understand what Miro is and how we can contribute. Elaine, we can't hear you.
Sorry, yeah, I was Googling some NoSQL stuff. Thank you, that was awesome. I feel ready to get started. So we're gonna try an online like shared whiteboard experience called Miro. And if you don't have experience with it, that's okay. It's pretty intuitive. So there's actually an integration in Hopin where I'll be able to basically share my screen, and in your screen sharing section in Hopin, you can interact with it. Or I will give you a link to our whiteboard and you can use the link in your browser to interact with it. But before we start getting into the whiteboard, I was just going to share my screen and give you an overview of the experience. So let's see. I wonder, okay, yeah, cool. Yes, there's my screen. Okay, so this is Miro, and the first thing is to navigate. You just, you can pan and zoom. If you use it on the browser, this little section in the bottom right-hand corner is like a little map. So the blue area is stuff that's all filled out. And we've pre-populated this board to take you through the system design in stages. So we have 5 little cards here. And so we have like about an hour left. So we're going to try to spend like 10 minutes on each one. And we'll move you through, but starting on 1, basically you would go to 1 and then zoom in. So the first one is requirements. And we've started with these stickies. And so what we're hoping is that in this left-hand pane, you can add lots of different things. There are really very many choices, but I recommend that we stick with the 4th one down, the sticky note, because it's quick and fast. And so you just drag one over and then you can, it's being a little slow right now, but you can type in it and add arrows from different points. If only it would start responding. Okay, there we go. So, typing. And then you can drag from the sides to produce an arrow. Like that. Hopefully it is not so slow for you all. And then you can see that there's a color here. It's also responsive to your zoom level. So like if you zoom in and create the sticky, it will be smaller. Come on. Oh, it's not right now. Sometimes it is. But in any case, you can resize it at the appropriate zoom level. Let me delete this stuff. And then the other thing that we discovered is that you can see people's avatars up here, which might be kind of hard to see right now, but like you can hover over it and see people's names. So you'll be able to see myself and other people who are signed in, like their names. Like Harini will be in here, who's with WWCode, and Prachi, of course. And so if you want to see where they're looking, you can just click on their little circle to see where they are on the board. And also you can see people's like cursors moving around. So if we're like, hey, come look at this thing, then you can click around and follow people that way. So that's all let me make sure I've covered everything. Yep, that's all I've got. So hopefully it won't be too hard. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to share Miro through Hopin. Mind blown.
Just one thing to note, like I mentioned before, we want this session to be interactive. So go ahead and add your sticky notes. And once you add your sticky notes, we would really appreciate if you can, like unmute and talk about, hey, what recommendation you made, right? Why did you add your sticky note? We would really want to hear from you, if you talk about your recommendations, your considerations, how are you solving this design question, right? So consider this session as like, hey, like, all of us getting together and designing something. And we just, discuss different ideas. I see lots of people. This is awesome. Elaine, do you want to start with the first frame?
Yeah.
Great. So this is very interesting. Yeah, so if we go to the first frame, requirements, like I mentioned before, right? We have this basic component diagram. It can, we felt like there is some base or something that we can work off of. Yeah, like think about like the first frame here is about requirements. Like what would your functional, non-functional requirements be here, right? If you're designing API, Airbnb, you have some backend, some database, some external integration, some APIs, some front-end or clients, and the blue sticky you see next to Airbnb, the block is like, hey, in this frame, you would want to talk about functional, non-functional requirements. So like, feel free to add your sticky notes in this frame. It can be something like, hey, the API needs to be like super fast. add a sticky note around the block API, or hey, the front end needs to do these things, or hey, in the external integration, these are the requirements. The external integration, like the external service needs to be very good at error handling. And they give us a lot of different errors. Now we need to also accommodate what those errors look like, right? Stuff like that. So like maybe Elaine, do you want to spend a few minutes on for people to add their notes, and then we can start talking about those topics?
Yeah. So first of all, I didn't copy the whole link, so please use the second link. If you do, whether you use it in the browser or in Hopin, if you click the blue arrow next to the big announcement button at the top of the screen, you can hide collaborators' cursors, and then it makes it like a little cleaner to look at. Unfortunately, you can't see where we all are, but hopefully we can just talk everyone through where we are. Is everyone okay? Would anyone like some support? I know this is like it's very trippy. Okay, cool. So I see someone adding cursor, sticky note, which is great. So we're in the first thing here, and functional and non-functional requirements. So someone says, what is the basic functionality we're trying to achieve? Showing listings, booking a place, having user accounts. Yeah, I think you could start with some user stories here. And if anyone's ever done like a structured retro, what we were going to do was give people 5 minutes to add stickies, and then we were going to take like a minute to group things. So I'm going to just stop talking and watch the clock for the next 3 minutes, and everyone just add stickies to do with functional and non-functional requirements.
Awesome. Thank you, Elaine.
Yes, Alicia, we should be on adding to the requirements board, that very first board.
Elaine, do you want to, in the screen, do you want to share the frame 1? I think this is this third frame. Is it, or second frame?
I'm not screen sharing. It is the integration. So
I see.
Yeah, which we could switch because
Yeah, I think we should do that. Yeah.
Really?
You were sharing a
Okay.
screen. That was perfect. If that's fine.
Are other people? Oh man, I don't know if we should do a poll. Quickly, let's switch. Everyone's getting dirty from the color. Is anyone using it in Hopin?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm saying lots for switching. Okay, we're gonna switch.
Okay.
Okay. Be a more unified design or experience. I told it to share, I think. Oh, there it is, I think. Okay, yeah. So
this looks amazing. Yeah. Because there we were able to see everyone's movement, right? And I felt like that can be confusing. This is much, much cleaner.
Cool. Let's see. It's been like 3 minutes. It looks like things are slowing down. Unless my screen is just laggy. Oh, I see another post-it. One
Yeah.
minute for that last post-it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh wow, there's lots popping up. Maybe my thing was just laggy.
Yeah, and if you're done, go ahead and like add to the frames that are coming next. But we'll just like, we'll talk about one frame at a time, but it's okay if you move forward and in the design. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can wait for just this person and then. Looks like people have slowed down a little.
Yeah, I think I see 3 more.
Oh, wait, yep.
Few more. So we're gonna wait. Yeah. Yeah, this is great.
Okay, so while people are completing stuff, is everyone on the board? Have we lost anyone? It's so hard to tell. I think I'll just post the link. The link was posted earlier. Okay, I'm not seeing any comments that people are lost, so I think we're good.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we can pause here and we can just start. Do you want to group, Elaine, or do you want to just like let folks start talking? We can pick a section and we can just start talking about that section.
I think start talking is good. Yeah.
Okay, so I see lots of sticky notes around Airbnb and functional, non-functional requirements. So folks who have added the sticky notes, yeah, would you want to just unmute and talk about?
I am not sure if people can unmute.
Yeah, so
I think they
that I'm
have
not sure
to,
about
if you would like
either.
to speak, you can request to join the stage and then I can add you to the stage.
Yeah, right.
So maybe we should like pick a sticky note and ask whoever would like to talk about it to be added to the stage. Oh wait, I see something in Q&A too. Okay, so there are a couple questions in Q&A that we can take later.
Yeah.
Okay, so shall we just go through the list?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I see this grouping here of searching and filtering listings, map view and list view, create listing. Who would like to talk about that?
Are you able to see requests coming in? I'm just trying to understand if
Oh, there are already 3 people on stage. There's no way to request to be on stage. There's 2 people now.
Okay, good.
So Lynn, can you try again? Yeah, Harini came out. I can go out too.
I can also go out.
I see a button that says full. What? Third might be the screen share. It's the screen share that counts as 1. Okay. I will leave. How do I leave? Okay, I figured out how to leave, but it might stop the screen share. So Prachi, I'm going to leave, and then you can add whoever, Lynn and whoever would like to speak.
Hi, Lynn. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. Hello.
Go for it. This is great. Hello.
Yeah, sorry. I was really just trying to help with helping with the technical difficulties, but I guess I can try to answer a little bit too. So for me, I guess the first thing I would do for like system design, I actually added the white sticky note, which is like asking, what's the basic functionality that we're trying to achieve. For me, I feel like, I think getting the basic user flows first would be best, and then trying to build on top of build more features based on how much time I would have. So for me, for example, I think for Airbnb, I think the most important thing is being able to create listings, see listings, and then as a user be able to book a listing. So that's where I would just start personally. But yeah.
Definitely. This is great. Thank you so much, Lynn. Definitely agree with you. What are we trying to do here, right? Like, can we can we describe that in 1 or 2 line summary? Definitely helps. Do we have anyone else? Otherwise, we can just, Elaine and I can go through the sticky notes.
Yeah, I'm also happy to pop out if somebody else wants.
Go for it. Go for it. Yeah. Do you want to talk about some sticky notes, Elaine? Or Lynn? Oh, well, I didn't. Okay, so I don't see Lynn. I think, Elaine, do you want to just jump back? Because this might take some time for folks to come in and talk about their sticky notes.
Okay, so I think if I don't share my screen, then we should have one spot for someone, a participant to
If
talk.
they need to, yeah. Sounds good. Do you want to just start talking about stickies?
Sure, yeah. I see a lot of stuff to do with, I was grouping them on the API and people are moving them away. But I just thought there was a lot to do with the API, which makes sense because it's very transactional. So I see create listing, see listing. I see someone, Debbie is making a user flow, which is awesome.
Great. Yeah. Awesome.
Every step of these is going to be from client to through API to backend. Make booking. Yeah. Create listing, see listing, make booking.
Yeah.
There's also this notion of. Go ahead. You first.
Okay. Yeah. So I also see the different features here, take payment, or it's actually functionality, take payments, or a user can sign up as a host or a guest. This is really good because now you're talking about all these different features or functionalities, core functionalities you need to build for, and you will want to design your data models, your APIs, your security, and user experience around these things. So this is definitely a really thorough list of all the requirements or all the things you're trying to achieve here. Something foundational that we can call it as hey, this is a basic foundational working Airbnb, and then we improve upon it to make it fancier or add more functionalities. So this is really good list of searching a big one, like how you view and list your like hotel availability or room availability. These are really good. Yeah, even the user experience, authentication for members to log in. Yeah, I think we can move on to backend databases, and then we can move on to the next frame where we talk about like database and data models in a bit more detail.
So you want to talk about the backend stickies?
Yeah.
Next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Elaine, do you want to talk about those? Yeah.
Let's see. So we can invite someone to the stage. I see around backend database replication across data centers, CQRS, optimized reads versus writes. So some backend like performance stuff. Would anyone like to speak to those stickies, or would the author like to jump on stage and explain them? They're the yellow ones below database. There's also client keys,
Right.
security of user information. Someone wrote that. We can talk about that now since it's on the board, or we can move it to the last frame.
Yeah, we can. I think this is good. In the interest of time, we can move forward to the next frame, because we'll talk about backend databases a bit more. So we can move on to the second frame, which is data models. I already see some stickies there. Yeah, if you can just scroll down and move on to the frame number 2, which is data models. There we'll focus on like database, and like, we can talk about caching. We can talk about a bunch of how data partitioning happens, sharding, bunch of different things. What are some of the considerations here? Like, how would you design your data objects? Would it be relational versus non-relational database? What tools would you want to use and why? And considering scale and asset compliance, what would be your goals? What would you want to try to achieve? User account login and personal data security protection. Yes, you have user information, you have login information, you have passwords. You need to persist passwords, right, for login. You don't design for security around that data. All data essentially, but particularly passwords. You might also store a user's information, like, I don't know, the date of birth or some other information. If that's what you're collecting, that will be PII. You'll need to also handle it properly for compliance reasons, of course. Data consistency, strong versus eventual, definitely a big, it's a great question. CAP theorem, partition tolerance. Yeah. Basically, the CAP theorem is like, you have some of the acid properties, right? Consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. So what the CAP theorem says is any system can only provide like 2 out of these 3 functionalities ever. Like, you'll never have consistency, availability, and partition tolerance all together in system. It's either consistency or partition tolerance, it's availability or partitioning, or it's consistency or availability.
Got a question about SQL versus NoSQL.
Okay. Which type of database to use, SQL or NoSQL? So that's a great question. If you have one basic consideration would be like, if you have some kind of relational data, right? Like, now you have a user, and you need that user information to do any kind of booking, to do any kind of like account management. Do you need to do any kind of payments? Then now your user information is linked to a bunch of different things. bunch of different data, bunch of different functionalities. So then there is some relation, with your user data and your user and all the other functionalities in your system. Then that would be a big plus for using relational. So for Airbnb, for user management, for booking management, you'd want to prefer a relational database ideally. But if you are designing for like a medical system or a medical record system for a hospital, right? Every patient's record looks different. It can be as simple as a document store. Every patient you store, what you store is basically a document of medical records or medical history, and that can look very different for different patients. So then NoSQL in a document store is a better option, all things considered, for such kind of application. So you need to understand like how your data is structured and what the data flow is. Remember, we talked about it before. Those will definitely help you make this decision. And then there are also things like SQL databases are more ACID compliant now. SQL not necessary. Do you need ACID compliance? Do you not? Right? Indexing. How efficient would you like that to be? Like, how much would you want to scale your data? Is it growing in petabytes every 6 months, or is it growing in like a few GBs? Then you'd want to pick a tool, a different data. Maybe pick SQL or Postgre or something like that. All these things you can consider.
Yeah,
That's true.
Shahid, I hope I'm saying your name right. But yeah, like the reason I sent that link to the Firestore data store documentation is that like you can like get off the ground very quickly. Like you just basically throw a NoSQL, a JSON, and it'll figure it out. Which it's great. It's just great because you don't have to worry about like the key constraints or whatever. But it's also very dangerous because then if you want your data to be more structured and if you want your data to be smart, or if you're thinking about like entities as almost like class objects where they have, there's a has-a relationship, or there's, this like composition where, let's say, payment has a transaction, then that's when you can't really, NoSQL sort of fails you. It's just like, it's almost like when I've used it, it's almost like it's text. So yeah, I guess personally, if we're talking about Anecdata, I would use NoSQL for a quick prototype. And then if like for anything that is gonna like has any of those complex relationships that Prachi was talking about, where you would want to store like a key to something versus like the whole record, then you'd want to do a traditional SQL database.
Yeah, Monica also.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, NoSQL, you don't need to migrate. That's right.
Definitely, yeah. And yeah, like I'm seeing people commenting and answering questions. Go for it. If you have a different answer that we didn't cover, just put in the comments. It's super helpful. Yeah, Jocelyn made a really good point. If you have a very big system and like Airbnb might do relational database for like storing user information and booking information, but for notification service or something like that, I don't know, it can pick a NoSQL database, one of the different kinds we have. So there is no one solution. Definitely, you just need to design your system to handle different data models and just understand the cost and trade-offs of picking of your choices. Yeah.
If you're learning, I would say like start with relational because it's like more complex and more common with like mature systems. I just remember because I learned SQL stuff first and then went to NoSQL and I was like, there's like nothing to learn here. You just like throw a JSON at it and it's fine. And then all of the stuff that you're usually very careful about in a relational database, like you don't have to worry about. So maybe that if you're like learning about stuff, I would be like, yeah, I shared a tutorial for a NoSQL database, but don't let that be the first database tutorial that you take. Do a traditional SQL database as your first tutorial. Won't share one right now, but there's lots out there. That is what I would recommend.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like traditionally SQL databases does not support like a JSON structure. Now pretty much every SQL database supports JSON, so you can totally have a column and it just stores a JSON blob, compared to you can store a JSON blob as a document in a document DB, a NoSQL document DB, right? So there you can all totally do that. If your relation database and your data model or object model is becoming really big, you can totally have a column and just persist that big object a model as a column, as a JSON blob. Modern DB, SQL DB support all that functionality for sure, or not modern necessarily, but like SQL DBs now support this functionality. Yeah, I think Elaine, we can start talking about databases. This is really good insights and observations. SQL versus non-SQL, we talked about that. Gap theorem, I briefly talked about that. High availability and cost. Back of the envelope calculation. Can someone just hop on the stage and talk about these things? Because
I'm going to
cost
hop
is what.
off so that someone else can hop on.
Yeah, thank you, Elaine. And maybe I can stop sharing the screen as well. Just if more people want to join. Yeah, I just want to understand, like, what do you mean by cost? Cost of like licensing, cost of just like time. I also see financial transactions. Definitely, that would be the payment service side of Airbnb, where we are storing transactional and payment information, and like what would that look like, right? Yeah, what we will integrate with some external payment service, right? One example is good, the Stripe API. So then we need to also accommodate what that API integration looks like, right? And what their data looks like, and do we want to persist? How do we want to integrate, right? Do we care about persisting all transactions? Yes, because we need to generate a receipt or invoice, right? After the booking is done. What if the payment fails? How would you want to manage that functionality? Right? How would you want to like update a booking or update the availability of a room depending on the payment was successful or it is not successful, right? If it is successful, you want to remove that room out of the list of available rooms in your database, right? And if the payment was a failure, then that room should now be available for someone else to book, right? So if someone else is accessing your website and you're getting that room availability information from the database, that room should now be available for them to now go and book. Does it need a service for cache, right? Yeah, so different parts of the system, maybe for different function, depending on the functionality we have, we may or may not require caching, right? Like for booking, we may require some basic booking information. We might want to keep it handy, but for search, necessarily not, because what if you have a website where there's a lot of traffic, like hotels rooms keep on getting booked, and it's very dynamic like that, then caching necessarily won't help us. Again, I'm simplifying. Caching is a big topic. There are a lot of considerations that go into how will caching look like. Failure tolerance, how many instances, K8s, yes. Resilience, fallback. Is this like resilience fallback? Is this like some kind of backup of your database, or I don't know what that would necessarily mean. Storage for pictures, so you can either have storage for pictures is a very good point. You can either have your CDN do that for you, a content delivery network do that for you, or you can just persist your images and keep a URL or a link to your pictures as one of the fields in a column, or as one separate column. You can have a column which stores a URL to a picture. You hit the URL, you can download the picture. So storing, which is pretty standard approach in general, but yeah, like you would want to that's a good example. Not maybe in a MySQL DB, but in a NoSQL DB, you might want to store images, or I don't know, some kind of content. CDN would be preferred. but there can be considerations around that as well. NoSQL DB for searching listings versus SQL DB for bookings. Yeah, sure. Definitely, like you can pick different type of data model structure here and different tools for sure. And all of your Airbnb data can be in very different databases, can be distributed in different ways. So for sure, it depends on the functionality, right? Like booking can be slightly slow, but like search should be really fast. Then you would want to design your database and your APIs and your SLAs around that. Data retention, yes, if you made a booking and you want to access it in your user account, you should be able to see it, right? Your data should be there. Asset compliance, all of that comes into the picture as well here. Strong versus eventual consistency, yes. One example would be Twitter tweets, right? It doesn't have a strong consistency. It's something eventual. So yeah, you might want to consider those are yeah, consistency is a big part. How do you want to design different parts of Airbnb and what the consistency would look like? Multiple data centers, if so, is syncing considered? Yes. An east shard, west shard, you have data centers, you would want to depending on the geographic location, you would want to folks in the east hit the east data center or east shard, right? Like folks in the west hit that. Definitely is something you would want to also think about. Not every service needs a cache. Airbnb can have 3 different services: one for users, one for booking, one for like sending notifications, right? Not all of them require caching, and they can be very different systems. So yeah. Elaine, do you want to move on to the next frame? I don't see questions. Yeah, Michelle, you're right. This is a very knowledgeable group. I'm loving this. Great contributions on the Miro board. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next frame and share my screen. Hey, Elaine.
Hey, sorry, it takes me a minute to get back. There's also a couple, well.
Oh, should I?
There's a couple Q&As in the Q&A section, but maybe we can reserve those for the end.
Sure. I don't see my stick. Oh, okay. Next is backend services. I don't know if folks can see my screen. Yeah. Yeah, so how would you want to like design our backend, right? Like how many services do we need? What would they look like? Do you have any kind of external integration? One example was payment service, right? To the Stripe API. That's a great example. That's a great call out. If you're doing external integrations, what are some of the things to keep in mind? If we have 3 services that are very much internal, then how would communication between these services, microservices, would look like? How would you design your microservices? Would you consider design patterns? Will all these microservices do CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete? Right? How many APIs would we need? We know the APIs, right? Like get, post, put, delete. You'd want to use HTTP words and RESTful APIs, right? Or do you want to use GraphQL? How would you want to do search here? Think about all of those things. Yeah, definitely. Priyadarshini asked a good question. Elaine, we can take questions at the end. I hope that's okay. Yeah, feel free to comment. Yeah, Arohi answered that question, so that's great. Elasticsearch, yeah. Please note that your service may not have any kind of external vendor integration, which is perfectly fine. There may be more than one external integrations. And one example I can give is, hey, this external vendor you're working with, their APIs, they send JSON data. This other vendor you're working with, they are still backwards, they send XML data. Now your backend service, if it communicates with both vendors, it needs to have it needs to have this layer of like translating or converting the DTOs into what your backend system recognizes. Your data model might be something SQL. Now how would you like take this input and convert it into what you need to persist, what kind of object structure your APIs and your business logic operates on. So you need to have that translation layer in between an external API, external service, and your backend service. This is great. I'm loving very different things people are thinking about. All great points. 100%. Payments, Elasticsearch. We can wait another minute, and then if someone wants to come and speak up, like let us know. Otherwise, we'll just from our understanding, read through these sticky notes and then move on to the next frame. Do put in the comments if you prefer not to unmute and talk. Just if you put a sticky, talk about it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Yeah, that's a good question from Nitasha. So I can quickly take this one. So So for NoSQL DBs, you apply the schema on reading. Your NoSQL database can be a document store or a graph data or something column-wide. All this structure can look very different, right? You apply a schema when you're reading that data, and then you translate into what your schema should look like for any kind of like business validation or any kind of functionality you want to do on the data, because you can store five documents and all of them can be very different, but they will adhere to some schema that is required for you to now do functionality on whatever data you persisted. So yeah, that's additional step with NoSQL. With SQL, what you do is you define a schema, and that's what reflects in your data, in your data models, and in your SQL DB. So when you write, you define a schema. Your API DTOs can look very different, but you convert them into a schema. That is what you want to persist across all records in your SQL DB. I hope I answered your question. Elaine, do you want to start talking about these stickies?
Yes. Would anyone like to speak to something they put on the board or that they see they would like to talk about?
Or they want to comment? Yeah. I don't know who wrote API gateway service mesh and stuff like that. That's amazing. It's good. Even this is like great comments. Definitely, the group is thinking a lot of different things, and I love this. Public APIs, REST versus GraphQL APIs, definitely consideration. Yeah, you would want an authentication service just for authenticating your users. Monoliths versus microservices, design patterns, yes. Definitely metrics is a big one. Shout out to whoever wrote that. Logging, monitoring, metrics, automated alerting, definitely auto scaling. These are some of the things that engineers now do, or you have DevOps or prod ops team that also helps you enable these things for your services. So yeah, really good call outs here. Third-party library or open source. Yeah, do you want to build in security of something custom, or do you want to use like JWT tokens or Keycloak or stuff like that to have secure API integrations? Payments to host on demand or scheduled payments. That would be a feature that would be a requirement. Definitely you can design around what that would look like. If it's scheduled, then how far out would you want to schedule your payments, right? Because until the payment is done, your cycle of booking, the life cycle of booking would not be considered complete. It might be pending, right? So you'd want to, if that's something that's fine, then you'd want to design around what that looks like. And then you would want to design a notification service around, hey, your payment is due. This is the due date. Go ahead. Now is the final, the duration, right? When you need to pay. Communication between microservices, yes. Like I said, it can be like some API, that RESTful API can be having JSON structure or XML. You'd want to design for that integration. Based on that, you'd also want to add some kind of mocking, some kind of testing frameworks in your backend for your code. So all of those things, I don't see that called out, but all of these things you'd want to consider as well. But that would be more into when you're in the development stage, but something to keep in mind. Security layer, public URLs to avoid directly calling the server. I am not sure what that means. Are you saying the APIs are public, accessed by anyone, or only, I don't know actually, or something that is very specific? Someone wants to just jump in and talk about that or put in their comments. I'd like to know. Elasticsearch, yes. If Elasticsearch would be great for like searching for listings, right? Room listings, searching for hotels. Definitely want to leverage like an Elasticsearch, a node or a cluster, depending on depending on your scalability requirements for searching needs. Yes. This is great. Did I miss anything? Stateless APIs to allow scaling during high load. Yes. So that's a very good call out. Airbnb, the way it is, it has state. State meaning like your login information and stuff like that. But if someone could give me an example of stateless API in this context, because let's say you're doing a booking using an account, then you need logged in an account, then you need some kind of user information to authenticate. Versus if you're a guest, then we would still let you book, but you would not want to authenticate. So is that a good example of state here? If someone can give me an example about like how would we have a stateless API in this for Airbnb? I'd like to know. Yeah, Nitasha asked a good question. So go back to what I said before. Yes, you want to talk about let me look at the board clearly. Yes, you want to talk about like hey, we want to have like payments right away, or you want to have scheduled payments. You don't want to talk about those things. You want to talk about metrics, automated alerting, these kind of things. But start with something that you would want to do. Right, you want to have an API, you want to have some kind of authentication service, you want to have some kind of security. For searching, you need to have Elasticsearch. So start with like what you're trying to do, how would you want to achieve that, then what tools would you prefer to achieve that, and then all these other things then you need to build to make a robust, available, performant product or service, right? So that is the approach you can take. Build something that's functional, and then now all these other things also we need to think about and do. Hey, we need to do extra integration, cool. We need to think about data models, we need to think about APIs, we need to think about security, right? So those are basics. But then like depending on a requirement, what would the interaction look like, right? All those things then now you need to build. So it's hard to say what would be priorities or important, because maybe your interview asked to design Instagram, then you'd want to design for stories. Is stories more important than posts? Is Instagram search more important than Instagram search for posts? For hashtags more important than search for people? You'll need to work with your interviewer to kind of understand, what's important to them or what they want you to focus on. System design interview questions are very open-ended, so it's hard to say what you want to focus on. In any case, you can go back to the principles and work backwards from there. We want the system to be highly available, highly performant. Okay, what does that availability mean? What does good performance mean here? What does robustness mean? Right? We are designing for a banking system. It should be very secure. What does that mean? You can also think about principles and then connect the dots between requirements and principles like that. User experience these days. If you have some time, I'm trying to take questions, but we might look into those later on. Elaine, do you actually want to move to the next section? I think we talked about everything.
Yeah, sure. So we've got like five minutes left. We're coming on 5 minutes left. So I don't know if we want to move towards a wrap up or get one more board in. I know this can be addicting.
Yeah, this is addicting for sure.
So colorful.
I see APIs and frontend just because someone asked about user experience. We would want to talk about that because security and beyond, which is the last frame, it is everything that we have not thought about yet or we have not considered yet. So let's move on to frame 4. APIs and front-end and user experience, and then we can leave some time for Q&A after that, take our questions.
Okay. So Emily, yes, I will leave this link live, and I'll also PDF. You can PDF the whiteboard, so we'll PDF it and post it on GitHub and Slack. And Prachi, someone asked if we got the job. So
Yes,
let's think about
honestly.
that.
Hey, this is how you are doing interviews. I'm impressed. This is great. Yeah, this is awesome.
All right, I'll set a timer for 2 minutes.
Yeah, definitely agree with what Sunita said. State and scaling might might not go hand in hand. So you want to see how light your service should be. Definitely something to think about. Yeah. And yeah, you can design a stateless service to get something spinning and working, and then you realize, hey, this product is doing well. Now we need to store more data. Now we need to we need to build 3 more features. For that we need to store some kind of data. Then you can introduce state. You can then decide NoSQL versus SQL. Then pick a database tool, and then like design your tables or your document around it, and then your data models, and then just like do that. Definitely. Yeah. Natalie asked front-end clients is more about UX. So that's a good question. Like, some applications are very, they are very like user experience focused, right? Then you would want to design your APIs, data models and stuff like that for, your front end, your mobile experience is very important, or your front end experience is very important. You're building a revenue generating model. You need to a product, then your user experience is really important. You're going through an experience, and let's say you are showing Airbnb or the listings, but when you click on book, the book button doesn't work properly, or there's a lag, or it times out. It's a horrible user experience. You lose customers right there. So you want to design for the front end, for the clients, for the user experience, and based on that you can also design your data models. You can design you can store like 50 fields in a database, but you only show like 5 fields at given point in your front end, in your user experience, right? Whatever that flow is. So therefore, like thinking about, for such systems, for such products, thinking about front end, thinking about how much data you are sending in the request and response of your APIs. Are you sending any PIIs? Would you offset something, right? Those things you want to think about. Do we want a chatty system, right? We have lots of APIs that do small things called asynchronous or called back to back, or you want to have one big API that serves all the data to the front end, right? But can your front end handle that? Is your front end caching? Is it not caching this data, right? Do you have images or documents? Is what your API is returning? How often does that cache need to have a TTL to expire, right? Or you need to evict. So you have to think about all those things if your application is very front end heavy like that. Mobile app development, different clients, accessibility. Oh, that's a good point. Very good point. Experimentation is really something that's it's becoming super important in today's times, where everything you're trying to do is like you're trying to just build products. Experimentation is a big part of it, and your backend supports experimentation totally. Localization, globalization, definitely. Showing data on the front end, paging, pagination, sorting. You'd want to think about those things as well. I'm going to add that.
Prachi, we are at a minute left for time.
Okay, so yeah, I think this is good. I hope so. Do we have any time to take questions or like?
So let's see. Mackenzie, are you here? I assume we can just stay on until we get kicked off, or add another 5 minutes. There are questions in the Q&A tab. We can start going through there. So let's see. Lucy asked a couple an hour ago. One is, what type of question and expectation around a systems design interview are there for a junior or a new entrant?
Yeah, so ideally for a junior or new entrant, they should not ask system design questions because you don't have the experience of coming up with a system design. You are getting that first job to actually understand and get better. So if they're asking you, it's not fair to you. They would ask you simple questions like, what you learn in computer science, like, hey, what is the client server architecture? So simple things like, hey, when you hit URL on, this is a very common question, when you hit a URL on a browser, what happens? Simple things like about networking, about data models, simple things around client server architecture and stuff like that is what they would want to stick to. But if they ask you to design Airbnb, it's not fair. They should not be asking you those questions. All that comes with experience, for sure. So yeah, and if they still ask you, you can always say, hey, I've never done this before, so can you remember? What do you need me to focus on? Can we talk about these 5 things? This is what I would talk about. I don't know everything. Can you point in the right direction so we can have a good discussion around designing Airbnb, given my experience and given what you're looking for in a candidate like me? Be very frank, be very honest. Interviewers are there to help you. So ask them. They want you to succeed. They want you to hire you. So keep that in mind and make your life easy by asking the right questions for them to help you out and point in the right direction.
Follow-up question. Can you open up and screen share a template like this and adjust it for the problem given? Like if you already have, a diagram of your favorite system.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, right? If now all of you now know Miro, which is awesome, you can now use that in your interviews. So thank you, Elaine. You can have a list of 5 stickies, right? Like you can have 5 stickies. One is about backend, one is about, so what we had here, right? If you see the first template where we talked about requirements, right? You can come up with something like that, which is already awesome. Right? The interview will be like, this person knows what they're doing. And then based on what your interviewer needs you to focus on first or focus on throughout the interview, you can just hey, I want to talk about backend, or let's talk about APIs for 15 minutes, then we'll move on to front end, or then we'll move on to databases, right? So typically all modern services have a backend, have a database, have external integration, have APIs, have front end. So if you even keep these 5 blocks, then that's awesome. And in the presentation we looked, right, hey, talk about requirements first, then talk about components and data models, backend, APIs, security and beyond. So that's a template you can keep in mind. Like, hey, this is what, if they don't tell you otherwise, you can say, hey, these are the 5 things I would want to focus on in this interview, and this is how I want to approach on. And if they ask you to dig deep, they ask you to write the APIs, then go for it. Let them direct you, and that's what you want to then focus on. But just creating a simple structure using Miro board now, totally do it. I would be impressed if someone did that. Someone came prepared with some visualization. You're already in good books. Now we want to know, understand how well you understand these systems and trade-offs.
Rena asked, can you end up going overboard, over engineering and designing too much? How do you know if you pass that point?
Help me understand, when do you know you are talking about something in very detail or over engineering things? So I would say this, keep it simple. Always start with something simple and then build on top of it. You don't have to talk about Kafka and caching and queuing and all of that at the very beginning. Just start simple and then build on top of it. That is always appreciated. Even when we as experienced engineers do something, we start with very small things, 2 or 3 things we need to think about, then we'll prioritize, then we'll see, oh wow, database, design the data model is becoming a pain. Let's see what we can do here. So start simple, start minimal, and then build on top of it, always.
Last question in the Q&A. When you talk about authentication, what are key concepts to mention in the context of a system design interview?
For authentication, is that the question? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, for authentication.
Yeah, so I mean, typical authentication is your user login and password, but you would want to build some kind of validation around it, right? Your passwords can be 8 digits, 10 digits, special characters and stuff like that. Someone also mentioned, right, in one of the sticky notes, you would want to have a guest do a booking without even creating an account and logging in. But if you have logged in, then you need to store that login information and make sure that every request for booking, listing is considered, right? If you are logged in, you might have done a search before, so you'd want to recommend you rooms according to your previous search history, right? There will be some kind of recommendation system that works. But if you're a guest, we don't have any history about you, so we would just show you what we would normally show to someone. So how a logging authentication account, all of that information, how can that will contribute to the features and the experience you give to someone. That's where I think authentication becomes bigger than just simple login, password, account, security management, two-factor authentication, stuff like that. You can, now you have all this information, you can build an experience around it as well. You have YouTube history, right? You see recommendations because you have some history. YouTube does that. But if you pause your YouTube history, you would not see recommendations in a given session about what you have seen before, because YouTube doesn't know what you like, what your interests are, right? So you can build that experience around like authentication and then account management and stuff like that, I think. In this case, a physical person who will eventually check in. Yeah, an agent could be booking on your behalf. They don't need to log in. Or they are an agent who has their account and they are doing bookings for different people. That's something that we can also enable as a feature. 6 months down the line, Airbnb is running, is doing well. Now agents want to get in. We want to open the product for agents, independent agents. Wow, awesome. Let's build in this feature. And then how will authentication look like? Can an agent do a booking for a different person who may or may not have an account with Airbnb? How would you want to store this information? How would searching, if there's already if you are an agent, you're booking an account, a booking for me, and I already have an Airbnb account, would you want to link this booking to my account? How would you want to solve these things? Yes, no, things to think about. Ask the interviewer. If you are working at a company, ask your product manager. Think about these things. Yeah, definitely. That opens up a lot of different other things you can do with your product.
Don't roll your own off. That's what I learned. That's like a very constantly repeated.
Yeah.
Don't write it yourself.
Yeah. I don't see any more questions. Do we have questions? Do we have comments? If you would answer some of these questions in a different way, just type it out. Let us know. We'd like to learn from you.
We've covered all the questions in Q&A.
Awesome.
I'm gonna whiteboard right now before anything happens to it.
Yeah. Thanks to all
thanks
of
everyone
you
for coming.
Yeah, for participating. This is awesome. This is like everything you could ever talk and think about. I learned so much from all of you today, like great insights, great observations. This is awesome. Thank you so much. And I shared the link to our Slack channel. We do the backend study group, and we let me share it again. And we have a Slack channel where we talk about things backend. We invite you to join, and in the channel, ask questions, and also we hope to see you in the backend study groups sessions that are upcoming. We have an AMA session, which is Ask Me Anything in December. And then next year, we want to do sessions about databases, system design, different backend systems, Node.js versus Python versus Java and stuff like that. So we'd love to see you there. I will share a link to YouTube. Someone asked backend study group sessions. So this is where we have recordings. Bear in mind, we only have we started recording all the sessions. Then we only record the demo part of the sessions, but rest of it is very much live. Yeah, but you can see all the previous recordings in this list, and we'll keep on adding. Where can we attend the live sessions? You can find them on Meetup. I can share the link to the next backend study session we have. It's an Ask Me Anything session where we will talk about backend engineering, women who code, any of the questions you have. And the next year, we would want to do more focused backend engineering sessions. On this SF, Women Who Code SF, page, you can also see all the other events that Women Who Code does. That is the one I shared is December 2nd, so that's upcoming. We don't have any more sessions planned after December 2nd because you're working on what those topics and timelines look like, so stay tuned. Yeah, you need to sign up on Meetup because then only after you sign up, you will see the Zoom link, which will set. So only then you can join. So we only allow participants who sign up. This event is not open for everyone. You need to sign up so we can share the Zoom link so then we can see you. We only wish to record demo part of the session. So let's say let's say we're talking about some topic and then we do a demo of it, right? Then we record the demo because people have asked for recordings. But the concept and walking through those other things is we stop recording all of that. Yeah, we may change it in the future, but Elaine can speak to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can. So pre-pandemic, we used to have live sessions. It was awesome. You could go in person and see a human in a room, and those were not recorded because then no one would come. And this effect sort of happened as things started opening up and the vaccines came out, like where we had a lot of good attendance in the beginning, and then people started like trickling out. And I think Prachi came to a meetup Zoom where there were 3 people in the room, and we realized that maybe it was because we were recording things. So we've gone back to our normal pre-Zoom times of the policy of not recording, and that's just to make sure that people are incentivized to show up so that the speaker has an audience, like a live audience to talk to. Because otherwise we would just do it totally differently. We wouldn't have live events. We would pre-record them all in a batch and release it that way. It's a different type of content. But yeah, I know some people were bummed to hear that we stopped recording, but this is just from experience of past leadership that this is what makes live events happen, is that they're special. See them again.
Yeah, and we want the sessions to be interactive. Like you don't want to network and connect and just talk about different topics, right? So recording doesn't help with that. That defies the purpose. So we only record demo part of the sessions now.
Prachi has we have 4 or 5 hours of content though on YouTube from those initial, when we were kicking off the series for backend, and those are great. And I still go back to those slides, and they're a resource that you can review for the rest of your career. So that is up and watchable. Can there be live telecast? I'm not sure. Natasha, you could, is it the time difference that's off? Because you could come to the meetup event. Anyways.
Elaine, it's 8 p.m. Do you want to?
Oh, sure. Yep. Time to go. Thank you, everyone.
So quickly, Natasha, we don't have any plans for personal meetups yet, depending on how things shape out with the pandemic and everything. That's TBD. All of our events are online as of now, and we intend to keep it
Okay.
in the short term. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. This was great. And hopefully we'll see you in the backend study group sessions that is in December and next year.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night. Bye. Thank you.